She was supposed to walk down the aisle. Instead, she was sprinting down a fire escape, $100,000 of white silk tearing on rusted metal. When she threw herself into the back of an idling black SUV to hide from the men hunting her, she thought she was saved. She didn't know the man in the bespoke suit sitting beside her was the city's most ruthless ghost. And she definitely didn't know he had been waiting for her. The rain didn't care that the dress was imported from Milan. It fell in thick, heavy sheets, pasting the layers of chiffon and silk to Harper's legs like a wet shroud. She ripped the veil from her hair 3 blocks ago, leaving it in a puddle near a storm drain. Her lungs burned. Every breath tasted like exhaust and copper. Behind her, the sharp, rhythmic slap of heavy boots on wet asphalt cut through the downpour. Bradley's men. They didn't shout. They didn't call her name. They just moved with the terrifying, quiet efficiency of predators running down an exhausted deer. Harper ducked into a narrow alley between a brick-faced deli and a closed laundromat. She pressed her spine against the freezing masonry, her hands clamped over her mouth to muffle her own ragged breathing. A flashlight beam cut through the dark, sweeping the mouth of the alley. "Check the loading dock," a voice ordered. Flat, professional. It belonged to a man named Gregory, Bradley's head of security. A man Harper had, just 2 hours ago, asked to make sure her elderly aunt had a good seat at the reception. Now, Gregory was hunting her. She had 20 seconds, maybe 30, before they looped back. Harper looked down at her feet. She had kicked off her heels miles ago. Her stockings were shredded, the soles of her feet bruised and bleeding from the shattered glass and rough pavement. She needed to move. She needed a way out, and the alley was a dead end. Through the chain-link fence at the back of the alley, she saw the street. Heavy traffic, red brake lights bleeding into the wet asphalt. And parked right at the curb, its engine producing a low, barely perceptible hum, was a black SUV. An armored navigator, unmarked, heavily tinted, sitting in the shadows of a broken street lamp. Harper didn't think. Thinking was a luxury for women who weren't about to be dragged back to a man who had casually ordered a murder over his morning espresso. She scrambled up the chain-link fence. The wire dug into her raw feet. Her dress caught on the rusted top loops, tearing with a loud, sickening rip. She didn't look back. She tumbled over the other side, landing hard on her shoulder in a pile of discarded cardboard boxes. Pain flared up her neck, but adrenaline smothered it. She scrambled to her feet, throwing her weight against the heavy rear door of the SUV. She fully expected it to be locked. She expected to claw at the handle, screaming, as Gregory's hands finally closed around her arms. The handle clicked. The heavy door swung open with a quiet, pneumatic hiss. Harper threw herself inside, dragging the massive, soaked skirt of her ruined wedding dress in with her. She slammed the door shut, locking it instantly, and collapsed onto the floorboards. She pressed her face into the thick floor mats, gasping for air, her entire body shaking violently. Outside, blurred by the rain and the heavy tint of the glass, 2 figures jogged past, Gregory and another man. They didn't even glance at the car. Harper let out a long, shuddering breath. Her chest heaved. The silence of the cabin was jarring after the roar of the rain. It smelled of expensive leather, ozone, and a faint, sharp tang that her panicked brain couldn't quite place. She squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for her heart rate to drop from a frantic drumbeat to something survivable. "If you bleed on the floor mats," a voice said, calm and impossibly close. "My driver is going to be very unhappy." Harper froze. The blood drained from her face. She slowly pushed herself up from the floorboards, her wet hands slipping on the leather seats. Sitting in the corner of the spacious back seat, barely illuminated by the passing streetlights, was a man. He didn't look surprised. He didn't look alarmed by the fact that a soaking, wet, bleeding woman in a shredded wedding gown had just breached his vehicle. He was holding a crystal tumbler with 2 fingers. The ice clinked softly as the car idled. He wore a dark suit, tailored so perfectly it looked like armor. His face was all sharp angles, cast in deep shadows, but his eyes caught the ambient light. They were dark, dead calm, and they were fixed right on her. Harper shoved herself back against the opposite door, her hand fumbling behind her for the handle she had just locked. "I'm sorry," she stammered, her voice cracking. I needed to hide. I'll get out. Just give me 1 minute." The man took a slow sip of his drink. He didn't move to stop her, but his gaze felt like a physical weight holding her down. "You can't get out," he said quietly. "I'm opening the door right now," Harper warned, though her fingers couldn't find the latch. Panic began to claw at her throat again. "The child locks are engaged," he replied, his tone conversational. He shifted slightly, resting his elbow on the armrest. "And even if they weren't, stepping out right now would be a poor, tactical decision. The men looking for you are currently standing on the corner of 4th and Elm. They're making a phone call." Harper stopped fighting the door. She stared at him, her chest rising and falling rapidly. "How do you know that?" The man didn't answer her. Instead, he leaned forward, pressing a button on the intercom console between the seats. "Drive, Thomas," he said. The SUV shifted into gear and pulled smoothly away from the curb. Harper watched through the dark glass as the figures of Gregory and the other man shrank and disappeared into the rain. She was safe from them. But as she turned her head slowly to look at the man sitting across from her, the faint smell in the car finally registered in her mind: gunpowder and old blood. She hadn't escaped the fire, she had just locked herself in the furnace. The SUV moved through the slick city streets with a heavy, gliding grace. Harper sat stiffly against the door, the wet fabric of her dress clinging to her skin, chilling her to the bone. Every time a street lamp washed over the interior, she tried to read the man sitting across from her. He hadn't spoken since he told his driver to move. He just watched the rain slide down his window, looking entirely unbothered by the invasion of his privacy. He wasn't old, perhaps early 30s, but there was a weathered, dangerous stillness to him that made him seem ancient. His hands were large, resting loosely on his knees. On his left wrist, a Patek Philippe watch caught the dim light. On his right cuff, just barely visible, was a small, dark smear. Harper swallowed hard. Her throat felt like sandpaper. "Where are we going?" "Away from the men who want to put a bullet in your head," he said, not looking away from the window. "I figured you'd appreciate the change of scenery." "They don't want to kill me," Harper said. It was a reflex, a desperate attempt to normalize a waking nightmare. "My fiancé just wants me back. It's a misunderstanding." The man finally turned his head. His eyes swept over her, taking in the torn silk, the mud on her face, the blood trickling from her right foot onto the pristine floor mat. His expression didn't change, but Harper felt thoroughly, brutally analyzed in the span of a single second. "A misunderstanding," he repeated. His voice was low, gravelly, but perfectly modulated. "So you ran through 3 miles of a torrential downpour, tore a custom Vera Wang to shreds, and threw yourself into a stranger's car because you and Bradley had a minor disagreement over the floral arrangements." Harper stopped breathing. The cold inside the car suddenly felt absolute. He knew Bradley's name. "Who are you?" she whispered, her hands curling into fists in her lap. "Does it matter?" he asked. "It matters if you work for him." Harper's eyes darted toward the heavy glass partition separating them from the driver. She tried to gauge the distance to the front seat, wondering if she could climb over. It was impossible, and she knew it. The man let out a short, hollow sound that might have been a laugh if it had any warmth in it. "I don't work for Bradley Stanton. Bradley Stanton pays a very large sum of money every month to ensure I don't pay him a visit at his corporate office, or his penthouse, or his country club." Harper felt a sickening jolt of recognition. Bradley was a real estate mogul, or so his publicist claimed. But over the last year, Harper had seen the cracks in the veneer. The midnight phone calls, the cash ledgers left open on his desk, the men with broken noses who showed up to his galas in cheap suits. And then, today, standing outside his study at the chapel, she had heard him give the order. He hadn't just ordered a hit on arrival, he had ordered a hit on the district attorney, and he had laughed while doing it. If Bradley Stanton, a man who casually murdered state officials, was paying protection money to the man sitting in front of her. "You're Declan Cross," she said. The name tasted like ash in her mouth. Declan simply tilted his head, acknowledging the identification without confirming it. He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket. Harper flinched, pulling her knees to her chest. Declan's hand paused. He looked at her flinch, a flicker of something unreadable passing through his dark eyes. He slowly pulled out a clean, folded linen handkerchief and tossed it onto her lap. "Wipe the mud off your face," Declan said. "You look like you're going to a funeral." "Aren't I?" Harper asked, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to keep it steady. "If I wanted you dead, Harper, you'd be dead." He knew her name, too. Of course he did. He knew Bradley, which meant he knew Bradley's high-profile trophy fiancé. "Then let me out," she said. She picked up the handkerchief, clutching it tight instead of using it. "If you don't care, and you don't work for him, let me out at the next corner. I'll disappear. You'll never see me again." "No, you won't," Declan said flatly. "You'll make it 4 blocks. Your feet are bleeding, you have no money, no phone, and you are wearing a beacon of white silk. Bradley's men will find you in 20 minutes. When they do, they will put you in the trunk of a car, and you won't be seen again." Harper knew he was right. The cynical, logical part of her brain, the part that had kept her alive in Bradley's gilded cage for 2 years, screamed that he was absolutely right. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. "Men like you don't do favors." "I'm not doing you a favor," Declan said. He leaned back into the leather seat, the shadows swallowing his face once more. "Bradley has been getting sloppy. He's drawing heat. And today, he managed to lose the one piece of collateral that was supposed to legitimize him in polite society. You. I am not a piece of collateral. To him, you are," Declan corrected seamlessly. "And right now, you are sitting in my car, which makes you my problem, or my leverage. I haven't decided yet." Harper stared at him. The sheer, blunt honesty of it was like a slap to the face. There was no pretense of chivalry here. He wasn't saving her. He was holding on to an asset. She looked down at the blood drying on her ankle. She had run from a monster wearing a tailored suit, only to climb into the den of an even bigger one. "Thomas," Declan said, not touching the intercom this time. The driver could hear them perfectly. "Yeah, boss?" The driver's voice came back through the speaker, gruff and indifferent. "Cancel the meeting at the docks," Declan said, his eyes resting heavily on Harper. "Take us to the estate. We have a guest." The iron gates appeared out of the rain like teeth in the dark. They parted seamlessly as the SUV approached, offering no sound of grinding gears or clanking chains. The driveway was long, winding through thick, overgrown pines that blocked out the city lights. When the house finally came into view, Harper felt a strange sense of dissonance. Bradley's penthouse was all glass, chrome, and aggressive displays of wealth. He bought art he didn't understand just to prove he could afford it. Declan Cross's estate was a fortress. It was stone and dark wood, built low and wide against the earth. There were no decorative fountains, no manicured flower beds, just security cameras tucked neatly under the eaves and motion sensor floodlights that bathed the gravel courtyard in stark, unforgiving white. The SUV rolled to a halt under a massive portico. Thomas killed the engine. The sudden silence in the cabin was heavy, broken only by the drumming of rain on the roof. Declan unlatched his door and stepped out into the damp chill. He didn't look back to see if she was following. He expected her to. That was the thing about men who commanded violence. They never doubted their own gravity. Harper grabbed the torn, ruined folds of her wedding dress and dragged herself across the leather seat. When her bare feet hit the driveway, the sharp gravel bit into her already raw skin. She hissed, her knees buckling instantly. She grabbed the edge of the car door to keep from eating dirt. Thomas was standing by the front bumper, lighting a cigarette. He watched her struggle with the detached interest of a man watching a television through a store window. A shadow fell over her. Declan had stopped halfway to the massive front doors. He turned slowly, his dark coat shifting around his broad shoulders. He looked at her bleeding feet, then at her white-knuckled grip on the car door. He didn't offer a hand. He didn't offer pity. If you want to survive the next 48 hours, you need to learn to walk on broken glass, Declan said, his voice carrying easily over the rain. Metaphorically, and apparently, literally. I ran 3 miles barefoot, Harper shot back, her voice shaking with exhaustion and a sudden, sharp spike of anger. Give me 30 seconds to find my balance. Declan watched her for a beat longer. You have 10. Harper gritted her teeth. She let go of the door. The pain in her soles was a white-hot flare. But she forced herself to take a step. Then another. She carried the heavy, soaked silk of her dress like a dead weight in her arms. She made it up the 3 stone steps to the heavy oak front door, just as Declan pushed it open. The interior was warm, but it wasn't welcoming. The foyer was vast, walled in dark paneling, lit by low-wattage sconces. It smelled of wood smoke and old paper. A woman stood near the base of a sweeping staircase. She was in her late 50s, wearing a simple grey cardigan and dark slacks, her hair pulled back into a severe iron-coloured knot. Helen, Declan said, shrugging off his wet overcoat. He handed it to the woman without looking at her. We have a stray. Helen looked Harper up and down. Her gaze was clinical. She took in the ruined designer gown, the mud, the blood dripping onto the polished hardwood floor. A loud one, by the look of it. Bradley Stanton's fiancée, Declan clarified. Helen's eyebrows twitched upward a fraction of an inch. It was the only sign of surprise she gave. I see. Does she need a doctor? Not yet, but she needs a bath, clean clothes and a bandage for her feet. Put her in the East Wing guest room. Declan finally turned his attention back to Harper. He looked her right in the eyes. Don't try the windows. The glass is reinforced, and the dogs patrol the perimeter at night. I'll send for you when you're presentable. He didn't wait for a response. He walked down a long, dark hallway, disappearing into the shadows of his own house. Harper stood shivering in the foyer, dripping rainwater onto the expensive rugs. She felt completely untethered. The adrenaline that had carried her through the escape was crashing hard, leaving behind a bone-deep ache and a creeping, paralyzing dread. Come along, Helen said briskly. She didn't sound unkind, just busy. Let's get that wet rag off you before you catch pneumonia. Harper followed the housekeeper up the stairs, leaving bloody, muddy footprints on the runner. The bathroom attached to the guest suite was larger than Harper's first apartment. Helen started the water in a deep, clawfoot tub, pouring in some kind of antiseptic-smelling salt. Harper stood numbly by the sink. Her fingers fumbled uselessly with the intricate corset lacing at the back of her dress. Helen slapped a towel over the towel rack and stepped behind her. "Hold still," the older woman ordered. With quick, efficient pulls, Helen undid the knots. The heavy silk collapsed around Harper's ankles, pooling on the floor like a deflated parachute. She stepped out of it, wearing only her ruined undergarments. She caught sight of herself in the vanity mirror. Her makeup was smeared down her cheeks like war paint. Her hair was a tangled, matted bird's nest. She didn't look like a bride. She looked like a survivor of a shipwreck. "Get in," Helen instructed, pointing to the tub. "There are sterile wraps and antibiotic ointment on the counter for your feet. Clothes are on the bed. Mr. Cross expects you in his office in 30 minutes. "Who is he really?" Harper asked, her voice quiet, echoing slightly in the tiled room. "Declan." Helen paused at the door. She looked back, her face unreadable. "He's the man who keeps the city from eating itself alive, and you just gave him the biggest bargaining chip he's had in years. Wash up, girl. You're going to need a clear head for whatever comes next." The door clicked shut. Harper was alone. She stepped into the scalding water, biting her lip to keep from crying out as the heat hit her raw feet. She sank beneath the surface, holding her breath, listening to the roar of her own pulse in her ears. She had 30 minutes to figure out how to be a player, not just a pawn. The clothes on the bed were men's. A thick, dark, grey cashmere sweater that hung past her thighs, and a pair of soft cotton drawstring pants she had to roll up 3 times at the waist and ankles. It wasn't exactly battle armor, but it was dry, warm, and entirely devoid of Bradley's influence. Harper sat on the edge of the heavy oak bed, carefully wrapping white gauze around the lacerations on her heels and the balls of her feet. The antibiotic ointment stung, a sharp reminder that she was still alive. She tied off the bandages, slipped her feet into a pair of oversized woolen socks Helen had left, and stood up. She took a deep breath. She pressed her palms flat against her thighs to stop the tremors. "You survived Bradley for 2 years. You can survive a conversation with a ghost." She opened the door. Thomas was waiting in the hallway, leaning against the wainscoting. He didn't say a word, just pushed off the wall and jerked his head down the corridor. Harper followed him. They walked through the silent, sprawling house. There were no photographs on the walls, no personal touches. It felt like a high-end hotel that had been closed to the public for a decade. Thomas stopped in front of a heavy double door at the end of the main hall and knocked twice. "Come," a voice called out. Thomas opened the door and stepped aside, gesturing for Harper to enter. As she stepped over the threshold, the door shut firmly behind her. Declan Cross's office was a massive, dimly lit space dominated by a mahogany desk the size of a dining table. Behind him, a wall of rain-streaked windows looked out over the black, dense woods. There were maps spread across a side table, pinned with colored markers. Stacks of leather-bound ledgers and external hard drives sat next to a glowing laptop screen. Declan was sitting behind the desk, wearing a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his forearms. The bespoke jacket and tie were gone. He was poring over a document, holding a pen loosely in his right hand. "Sit," he said, without looking up. Harper limped over to one of the leather wingback chairs facing the desk and sat down. She kept her spine perfectly straight. She wasn't going to cower. Declan finished his paragraph, signed his initials at the bottom, and closed the folder. He finally looked up at her. His dark eyes flicked over her borrowed clothes, taking in the change in her demeanor. The panicked bride from the SUV was gone. The woman sitting across from him was pale, exhausted, but her jaw was set. "Bradley will be turning the city upside down right now," Declan began, his voice a low, even rumble. He has the police chief in his pocket, half the Port Authority, and roughly 200 men who are paid specifically to break bones. By midnight, your picture will be on every local news station, branded as a tragic disappearance or a kidnapping. He can't go to the police, Harper said flatly. I know too much. Declan leaned back in his chair, folding his hands over his stomach. Do you? Bradley likes pretty things on his arm. He doesn't strike me as a man who shares his corporate strategy over dinner. He didn't share it. I listened. Harper met his gaze, refusing to blink. Bradley thinks women are decorative. He thinks we're deaf and blind as long as the credit card clears. He took calls in the study while I read on the sofa. He left his safe open while he showered because he assumed I didn't know what a bearer bond was. Declan remained perfectly still, but the atmosphere in the room shifted. It grew sharper, tenser. Go on, he prompted quietly. He's bleeding cash, Harper said, her voice steadying as she laid out the facts. The waterfront development project is a front. He's using it to launder money for the Sinaloa cartel, but he's 3 months behind on his payments. That's why he's so desperate for legitimacy. The marriage, the DA's endorsement. It was all supposed to secure a federal grant to cover the missing cartel money. For the first time since she met him, Declan looked genuinely surprised. The mask slipped for just a fraction of a second, revealing a sharp, calculating predator underneath. You're telling me Bradley Stanton is skimming from the cartel? Declan asked, his tone dangerously soft. I'm telling you he lost $50 million in a bad offshore crypto bet, and he's using the waterfront concrete shipments to hide the deficit, Harper corrected. I know the exact shipping containers. I know the port schedules. I know the name of the customs agent he bribes every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. The only sound was the rain lashing against the glass behind Declan. He stared at her, really looked at her, reassessing the entire situation. She wasn't just a bride who got cold feet. She was a walking hard drive of Bradley Stanton's fatal mistakes. Why didn't you go to the FBI? Declan asked. Because the FBI agent assigned to Bradley's task force drives a new Mercedes every 6 months, and his daughter's private school tuition is paid from an LLC Bradley owns, Harper said, a bitter, cynical smile pulling at the corner of her mouth. If I went to the feds, I'd be dead before I finished filling out the visitor log. If I ran, his men would hunt me down. So I got in your car. Declan slowly picked up his pen, tapping the blunt end against the desk. You jumped into a shark tank to avoid a firing squad. I jumped into a tank with a bigger shark, she countered. You hate him. You want his territory. I want to live. I can give you the exact blueprints to tear his empire down to the studs. And in exchange? In exchange, you keep me alive, Harper said, her voice dropping to a fierce, desperate whisper. You hide me until Bradley is in the ground or in federal prison, and then you give me enough cash to disappear. Declan studied her. The vulnerability she had shown in the car was locked away, replaced by a cold, hardened survival instinct. He respected it. More than that, he recognized it. It was the same instinct that kept him alive on the streets before he built his own empire. He tossed the pen onto the desk. It landed with a sharp click. You have a deal, Harper, Declan said. But understand this. You are playing in my world now. You lie to me, you hold back information, or you try to run before I say you can. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk, his eyes entirely devoid of warmth. Bradley will be the least of your concerns. I don't run from people who keep their promises, she replied. Good. Declan pulled a blank notepad toward him and clicked the pen open. Start talking about the shipping containers. By 2 a.m., the massive mahogany desk was covered in architectural blueprints, shipping manifests printed on thick stock paper, and 3 empty mugs of black coffee. Harper pointed a bandaged finger at a faded blue line intersecting a grid on the port schematic. Terminal 4, Container Row, 884, Bravo. He rotates the exact unit every week, but it's always logged under Pacific Apex Shipping. They claim it's raw industrial aggregate, concrete powder. It's not. Declan leaned over the desk, tracking her finger. He smelled of rain and faint bergamot. He hadn't sat down in an hour. It's the cash from the cartel, he murmured, his mind already 3 steps ahead of the sentence. Vacuum-sealed in 50-pound bags, stacked behind a false wall of actual concrete powder to pass the dogs. Exactly, Harper said, her voice hoarse. She took a sip of her cold coffee. It tasted like battery acid, but it kept her eyes open. The customs agent, a guy named Fowler, signs off on the manifest at the gate. The truck goes to Bradley's waterfront development site. They unload the cash into the foundation framework of the South Tower. When the cartel's accountant comes to collect, Bradley issues it back as consulting fees through 3 dummy corporations. Declan straightened up. He looked at the map, then at the clock on the wall. 12:15 a.m. He picked up a sleek black phone from the desk and pressed a single button. The line didn't even ring before it was answered. "Sullivan," Declan said. His voice was low, devoid of any inflection. "Take a 6-man crew to Terminal 4. You're looking for Pacific Apex Shipping, row 884 Bravo. You have a 30-minute window before the shift change." A garbled, tinny voice replied through the receiver. Declan listened, his jaw tightening slightly. "I don't care about the gate guards. Break the lock, ghost the cameras, and get the truck. If you see a customs agent named Fowler, break his jaw and leave him in the guardhouse. Bring the cargo to the south warehouse." He hung up. Harper stared at the phone. Her pulse thudded heavily in her throat. Telling him the information was one thing. Watching him weaponize it was another. With a 30-second phone call, Declan had just initiated a multi-million-dollar theft that would cripple the most dangerous man she knew. "You didn't ask him to be careful," she noted quietly. "Sullivan is always careful," Declan replied. He closed a ledger and slid it into a drawer. "If I have to tell my men to do their jobs properly, they cease to be my men." "You look like you're going to pass out." "I'm fine." "You're shaking." She was. The adrenaline was finally losing its war against sheer, physical exhaustion. Her hands trembled so badly she had to put the coffee mug down to avoid spilling it. She crossed her arms tightly over her chest, hugging the oversized cashmere sweater to her body. Declan walked around the edge of the desk. He stopped 3 feet away from her. Close enough to be a physical presence, far enough to give her the space she clearly needed. "You just handed me $50 million of cartel money," Declan said, his dark eyes analyzing her trembling frame. "You just painted a target on Bradley Stanton's back that he will not survive. You did exactly what you set out to do, Harper. The trap is sprung. So why do you look like you're going to the gallows?" Harper looked up at him. The sheer exhaustion stripped away the last of her filters. "Because Bradley won't just die," she whispered. "He'll scorch the earth first. He'll hurt people. He'll tear the city apart looking for me, and looking for whoever took his money. I started a war tonight." "No," Declan corrected, his tone dropping to a hard, unforgiving gravel. "You gave me the ammunition to finish one. Bradley has been a cancer in this city for 5 years. He's messy, he's loud, he kills civilians when they get in his way. I don't." He reached out, his large hand pausing in the air for a fraction of a second before his knuckles grazed the side of her arm. It was a fleeting, grounding touch. "Go to sleep, Harper. When you wake up, Bradley's empire will already be burning." Harper wanted to argue. She wanted to stay awake and monitor the radios, to know for sure that Sullivan got the truck, that the cartel money was secured. But her body betrayed her. Her vision blurred at the edges. She gave a stiff, jerky nod, pushing herself out of the leather chair. Her bandaged feet throbbed violently with the first step, but she forced herself to walk without limping, keeping her spine straight as she left the office. Declan watched her go. When the heavy door clicked shut, he turned back to the window. The rain had stopped. The city glowed in the distance, a hazy smear of orange against the black sky. He picked up his phone again, dialing a different number. "Thomas," Declan said into the dark room. "Double the perimeter guard. Bradley is going to realize he's bleeding by sunrise. I want the gates locked down." The light in the guest bedroom was grey and thin. Harper woke with a violent start, her chest heaving, the phantom sound of heavy boots chasing her echoing in her ears. She sat up, her hands clutching the thick duvet. She was alone. The room was silent. She threw off the covers and swung her legs over the edge of the bed. Her feet were swollen, the white gauze stained with fresh yellow ointment and faint spots of dried blood. She stood up, hissing as pain shot up her calves. She forced herself to walk, prioritizing balance over comfort. She found a pair of men's slippers by the door and shoved her feet into them. Downstairs, the house smelled of bacon and dark roast coffee. Harper followed the scent to the massive industrial-grade kitchen at the back of the estate. Helen was standing at a 6-burner stove, flipping eggs in a cast-iron skillet. Sitting at the long marble island was Declan. He was wearing a fresh shirt, dark navy this time, but the shadow of stubble on his jaw told Harper he hadn't slept at all. He was reading a tablet, a cup of black coffee steaming next to his elbow. Mounted on the wall above the double refrigerators was a flat-screen television. It was muted, tuned to the local news. "Sit!" Helen commanded without turning around. "You look like a stiff breeze would snap you in half. Eat!" Harper hobbled over to a heavy wooden stool 2 seats away from Declan. She sat down just as Helen slid a plate of eggs and toast in front of her. "Did Sullivan get the truck?" Harper asked, looking directly at Declan. Declan didn't look up from his tablet. "Sullivan secured $52 million in vacuum-sealed $100 bills at 3:14 a.m. The customs agent is currently nursing a shattered cheekbone and a severe concussion. The truck is currently being smelted down for scrap in a salvage yard in Queens." Relief washed over Harper, cold and sharp. It worked. "Eat your eggs," Declan added softly. Harper picked up a fork, but before she could take a bite, the screen on the television flashed to a breaking news graphic. The headline crawled across the bottom in bright red. "Tragic disappearance. Real estate mogul's fiancé vanishes on wedding day." "Turn it up," Harper said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Declan reached for the remote and unmuted the television. The camera cut to a press conference held on the steps of the municipal courthouse. The rain had cleared, leaving the marble steps gleaming. Standing behind a podium, flanked by the chief of police and the district attorney, was Bradley. Harper's stomach violently contracted. He looked impeccable. His dark suit was immaculate. His expression was a perfect, chilling mask of devastation. "Yesterday was supposed to be the happiest day of my life," Bradley said to the cluster of microphones. His voice cracked. It was a masterful performance. Instead, it has become a living nightmare. My beautiful Harper was taken from the chapel before she could walk down the aisle. We believe she was abducted by individuals looking to extort my company. "He's spinning it," Harper breathed, her knuckles turning white around her fork. "He's framing his missing cartel money as a ransom payment." "Smart," Declan murmured, watching the screen with clinical detachment. "It buys him time with the Mexicans. He can tell them the cash was stolen to pay your kidnappers." On the screen, Bradley leaned closer to the cameras, his eyes locking dead center into the lens. "To the men who took her, keep your demands. Keep the money you stole from my port last night. Just give her back. But know this, if you hurt one hair on her head, there isn't a hole deep enough in this city to hide you." The broadcast cut back to the anchor desk. Declan muted the television. The silence in the kitchen was suffocating. Harper stared at the screen, her heart hammering against her ribs. Bradley had just publicly connected her disappearance to the stolen money. He had weaponized the police force, the DA, and the media in one calculated move. He wasn't just hunting a runaway bride anymore. He was hunting a kidnapping syndicate. "He knows," Harper said, her voice shaking. "He knows I didn't get kidnapped. He knows I ran. And he knows I gave up the port." "He suspects," Declan corrected smoothly. He set his tablet down and finally turned to look at her. "He knows the timing is too perfect. A stolen bride and a stolen shipment within 12 hours. He's putting the pieces together. He'll use the police to tear apart every warehouse in the district," she warned. "He'll use the DA to get warrants for your properties. Let him try. My legitimate businesses are impenetrable, and my illegitimate ones don't exist on paper." Declan picked up his coffee cup. "The question isn't what Bradley is going to do. The question is how you're going to handle the pressure." Harper looked at him, her fear suddenly crystallizing into something hard and sharp. "What do you mean?" "I mean, Bradley just offered you a way out," Declan said, his dark eyes locking onto hers. "He just told the world you're an innocent victim. If you walked into a police station right now, you could play the traumatized hostage. You could go back to him, tell him it was all my doing, and he would likely forgive you to keep up appearances. It's the safest play for a woman who wants to live." Harper stared at the mob boss sitting across from her. He was testing her. He was offering her the door to see if she would run. She picked up her fork, stabbed a piece of toast, and took a bite. She chewed slowly, swallowed, and met his dead calm gaze. "I'd rather take my chances with the ghost," she said coldly. "Now, pass the butter." Declan stared at her for a long, heavy moment. Then, the faintest ghost of a smirk touched the corner of his mouth. He slid the butter dish across the marble island. "Good," Declan said, "because I have a job for you." "A job?" Harper repeated. The word felt strange in her mouth, completely detached from the reality of her situation. She set her fork down. The eggs suddenly looked like plastic. "I'm a fugitive in a stolen cashmere sweater. What kind of job could I possibly do for you?" Declan pushed away from the marble island. He walked over to the heavy oak door leading out of the kitchen and locked it. The heavy deadbolt engaged with a loud, final click. He turned back, leaning against the counter, his arms crossed over his chest. "Bradley just played his best card," Declan said. "He invoked the public. He made himself the grieving victim and forced the police to treat this as a high-stakes kidnapping. By noon, every patrol car in the tri-state area will be looking for my vehicles. He's going to use the state's resources to shake down my operations while keeping his own hands perfectly clean." "Because he has the district attorney in his pocket," Harper said. "Exactly." Declan walked back to the island, sliding his tablet across the cold marble until it rested directly in front of her. "I have the money. That cripples his cartel standing. But it doesn't stop him from using the city's infrastructures against me. To do that, I need to cut off his head. Politically speaking." Harper looked down at the tablet. It displayed a sprawling, complex flowchart of Bradley's known associates, politicians, judges, police captains. It was a web of corruption, and Bradley sat right at the center. "He doesn't just pay them," Harper said quietly. She traced a finger over the digital face of the police chief. Bradley doesn't trust loyalty bought with cash. He prefers leverage. Blackmail? Where does he keep it? Declan asked. The question was blunt, a hammer striking a nail. Harper closed her eyes. She thought back to the late nights in the penthouse, the hushed phone calls in the study, the way Bradley would casually mention a judge's gambling debts or a councilman's mistress just before a crucial zoning vote. He never kept physical files in the apartment. He was too paranoid for that. He goes to the Century Club, Harper said, opening her eyes. Every Thursday at 4 o'clock. He says it's for squash, but he hates squash. He always takes his leather briefcase, the one with the biometric lock. But when he comes back, the briefcase is lighter. I noticed it once when I picked it up to move it off the dining table. Declan's expression didn't change, but the energy around him sharpened. The Century Club has private patron vaults in the sub-basement, unregulated. No cameras in the vault room to protect the privacy of the members. He keeps the drives there, Harper confirmed. Everything he has on the DA, the chief, the port inspectors. If you get those drives, you don't just neuter Bradley, you own the city. Declan studied her. He was dissecting her usefulness, weighing the risk against the catastrophic reward. Can you get me inside? No, Harper said. The Century Club requires a retinal scan for vault access. Only the patron can open their designated box. Declan picked up his coffee cup, taking a slow sip. That's unfortunate. But, Harper added, her voice hardening, I know who manages the vault security system. A man named Arthur Vance. She paused, catching herself. Arthur Penhaligon. Declan raised an eyebrow at the rapid correction, but didn't press it. The security chief. He's not just the security chief. He's Bradley's creature, Harper explained, leaning forward. Bradley caught him embezzling from the club's pension fund 3 years ago. Instead of turning him in, Bradley kept him in place. Arthur owes his freedom to Bradley, but Arthur is terrified of his own shadow. If you put enough pressure on him, he'll crack. He can bypass the retinal scanner. I watched him do it once when the system went down during a power grid failure. Where is Arthur right now? He drinks at a dive bar called The Anchor in the Diamond District, Harper said without hesitation. Every day at noon, like clockwork. He drinks 2 gin martinis and complains about his ex-wife to the bartender. Declan pulled his phone from his pocket. He didn't dial. He just hit a speed dial button. Thomas, we need a quiet conversation with the security chief at the Century Club. He'll be at the Anchor in an hour. Bring him to the warehouse. Do not break him. I need his fingers intact. He hung up. Harper watched him, a cold knot forming in her stomach. You're going to hit the vault today. I am going to hit the vault in 3 hours, Declan corrected, before Bradley realizes his blackmail material is exposed. Once I have the drives, I will anonymously leak the DA's file to the federal prosecutor's office. The local cops will freeze. Bradley's protection will evaporate overnight. He'll kill Arthur. Arthur made his bed when he decided to embezzle, Declan said coldly. I am not in the business of saving corrupt security guards. He looked at her, his dark eyes locking onto hers. You gave me the target, Harper, but I need you to guide the strike. Arthur won't talk to my men. He knows they're hitters, but he knows you. He knows you're Bradley's fiancée. If you walk into that warehouse and tell him Bradley is burning the evidence and Arthur is the scapegoat, he'll hand over the override codes willingly. Harper's breath hitched. You want me to interrogate him? I want you to manipulate him, Declan corrected. You survived Bradley by observing his tactics. Now I want you to use them. The warehouse smelled of rust, damp concrete, and the sharp tang of motor oil. It was entirely empty, except for a solitary metal folding chair bolted to the floor under a harsh halogen work light. Arthur sat in the chair. He wasn't tied up, but the two massive men standing by the corrugated steel doors made restraints unnecessary. Arthur was sweating through his cheap suit, his eyes darting frantically around the cavernous space. Harper stood in the shadows near a rusted support beam. She was wearing clothes Helen had provided, a sleek, dark turtleneck, black slacks, and a long wool coat that hid her trembling frame. Declan stood beside her, silent as a grave. "Go," Declan murmured, his voice barely a breath against her ear. Harper stepped out of the shadows. The harsh halogen light hit her face, illuminating the exhaustion she couldn't hide, but she forced her shoulders back. She walked toward Arthur with the same measured, terrifying calm she had seen Bradley use 100 times. Arthur flinched when he saw her. "Miss Harper, what is this? Bradley said you were kidnapped. Does it look like I'm kidnapped, Arthur?" Harper asked. Her voice was flat, empty. Arthur swallowed hard, wiping sweat from his upper lip. "I don't understand. Why am I here?" "Because Bradley is cleaning house," Harper lied smoothly. She stopped 5 feet away from him, looking down at the terrified man. "The cartel money was stolen last night. $50 million. Bradley is panicked. He's liquidating assets and scrubbing his tracks." "That has nothing to do with me," Arthur protested, his voice cracking. "It has everything to do with you," Harper said, taking a slow step closer. "He's sending a crew to the Century Club in an hour to empty the vault." "But he's not taking the drives, Arthur. He's planting the missing cartel ledgers in your office. He's going to hand you over to the feds to buy himself time." Arthur turned a sickly shade of grey. No, he wouldn't do that. I've been loyal. Bradley doesn't care about loyalty. He cares about survival. I ran because I knew he was going to pin the embezzlement on me, Harper fabricated, her voice dipping into a conspiratorial whisper. "We are both dead weight to him now. But I found friends who can protect us. If you give us the override codes to his vault, my friends will retrieve the drives. We use them against Bradley. We destroy him before he destroys us." Arthur looked desperately past her, into the shadows where Declan stood. He couldn't see the Mafia boss, but he could feel the menace radiating from the dark. "He'll kill me," Arthur whispered, tears welling in his eyes. "He's already planning to," Harper countered instantly. "This is your only way out. Give me the code, Arthur. Give me the master keycard." Arthur's hands shook as he reached into his breast pocket. He pulled out a thick, unmarked black keycard and a small piece of folded paper. He held them out as if they were burning him. Harper took them. Her fingers brushed his, cold and clammy. "Thank you, Arthur. My friends will make sure you get out of the city safely." She turned and walked back into the shadows. As soon as she was out of the light, her knees buckled slightly. Declan's hand shot out, gripping her elbow, steadying her effortlessly. "Flawless," Declan murmured. He looked at Thomas, who was standing by the door. "Put him on a bus to Ohio. Give him 10 grand, and tell him if he ever comes back to this zip code, I'll bury him under the new stadium." Thomas nodded, moving toward the weeping security chief. Declan guided Harper out of the warehouse and into the waiting black SUV. The rain had started again, a fine, miserable mist that coated the city in a grey film. "We have the card, we have the code," Harper said, staring down at the plastic square in her hands. "You can send Sullivan. Sullivan is dealing with the cartel fallout," Declan said, sliding into the seat beside her. He tapped the glass partition. "The Century Club, Thomas. Fast." Harper whipped her head around. "You're going yourself?" "I don't trust this kind of leverage to runners," Declan said, checking the magazine of a sleek, black handgun before sliding it into the holster beneath his jacket. "And you're coming with me." "What?" Why? Panic flared in her chest. Because Arthur is a coward, and cowards panic. If there is a secondary failsafe, a verbal passcode, a security question, you are the only one who knows enough about Bradley to guess it. You are my key. The SUV surged forward, merging aggressively into the afternoon traffic. 30 minutes later, they pulled into the alley behind the Century Club. It was a massive, ivy-covered stone building in the heart of the financial district. The service entrance was unguarded, exactly as Arthur had promised. Declan moved with terrifying speed. He swiped the black card. The heavy steel door clicked and swung open. He pulled Harper inside, navigating the narrow, dimly lit service corridors with the confidence of a man who had memorized the blueprints. They reached the sub-basement. The air grew cold, smelling of ozone and polished steel. A heavy, reinforced door blocked the hallway, next to a retinal scanner. Declan typed the override code from Arthur's paper into the physical keypad beneath the scanner. The light blinked green. The heavy door hissed open. The vault room was lined with hundreds of small, square stainless steel doors. Box 402. Bradley's box. Declan walked over to it. He inserted the black keycard into the slot and punched in a secondary code. The lock clicked. Declan pulled the small metal drawer out. Inside sat 3 black external hard drives and a thick manila envelope. Declan reached for the drives, but Harper's hand shot out, grabbing his wrist. Her skin was freezing, her grip surprisingly strong. "Wait," she breathed, staring into the dark, empty space of the metal box. "What?" Declan asked, his voice a tense whisper. "There's a wire." She pointed to a barely visible thread of copper connecting the back of the envelope to the rear of the box. "It's a pressure trigger. If you pull the envelope, it trips a silent alarm directly to Bradley's phone." Declan froze. He looked at the wire, then up at Harper. A genuine, unmasked look of respect flashed in his dark eyes. "Good catch," he murmured. He pulled a slim titanium blade from his pocket, carefully sliding it behind the envelope to sever the wire without pulling the tension. He grabbed the drives and the envelope, shoving them into his coat. "Let's move." They turned to leave the vault room. But as the heavy steel door hissed open, a shadow blocked the exit. Standing in the corridor, holding a suppressed pistol leveled directly at Declan's chest, was Gregory, Bradley's head of security. "Arthur missed his check-in," Gregory said, his flat, dead eyes shifting to Harper. "Mr. Stanton thought you might show up here, you treacherous little bitch." Gregory didn't look like a man about to commit murder in a private club. He looked bored. The suppressed barrel of his pistol was perfectly steady, pointed center mass at Declan. "Drop the envelope, Cross," Gregory said, his voice echoing against the stainless steel walls. "Slide it across the floor, then kick the drives over." Declan didn't move. He just stared at Gregory with the cold curiosity of an undertaker appraising a client. He stepped slightly to his right, a subtle shift that placed his broad shoulders squarely between Gregory's sightline and Harper. "Bradley sent his dog to fetch his secrets," Declan murmured. "I'm surprised he didn't come himself. Though I suppose he's busy trying to explain a $50 million deficit to Sinaloa." Gregory's jaw tightened. "I won't ask twice." Harper's mind raced. Gregory was a professional. He wouldn't hesitate. But he was standing on polished marble, 3 feet from the heavy brass step stool used to reach the upper vault boxes. She didn't think. She just moved. Harper threw her weight forward, kicking the brass stool with her bandaged foot. The heavy metal screeched against the marble floor, a sharp, jarring sound that shattered the quiet of the vault room. Gregory's eyes instinctively flicked toward the noise. A fraction of a second. A purely involuntary human reflex. It was all Declan needed. He didn't waste time drawing his weapon from his shoulder holster. He simply angled his body, slipped his hand into his heavy wool overcoat, and fired straight through the fabric. Thwack! Thwack! The suppressed shots sounded like a heavy hammer striking wet sand. Gregory's eyes went wide. His own gun discharged, the bullet sparking harmlessly off the ceiling as he collapsed backward onto the cold tiles. The room descended into a ringing silence, broken only by the smell of burnt cordite and scorched wool. Declan slowly pulled his handgun from his ruined pocket. He kept the barrel leveled as he walked over, kicking Gregory's weapon across the floor. Gregory was entirely still. "You ruined your coat," Harper breathed, her voice trembling. "Bespoke is replaceable," Declan said. His dark eyes swept over her, checking for injuries. "Are you hit?" "No." She wrapped her arms around herself, staring at the body. "Is he?" "Yes. We need to leave. Now." Declan grabbed her elbow, guiding her out of the vault room. They moved like ghosts through the sub-basement, bursting out of the heavy steel doors into the cold alleyway. The black SUV was already idling, the rear door thrown open by Thomas. They collapsed into the leather seats. The door slammed shut, and the SUV tore out of the alley before Harper could even buckle her seatbelt. Declan didn't waste a second. He pulled a matte black laptop from a hidden compartment, connecting the hard drives with practiced efficiency. His fingers flew across the keyboard. Bradley kept his ledgers encrypted, but the encryption is cheap, Declan noted. Rows of data waterfalled down the monitor. He relied on the physical security of the vault. Arrogant. Harper leaned her head against the cool glass, watching the city blur past. "What are you doing with it?" "Sending the district attorney's file to the state prosecutor and the press. Sending the port inspector's payroll to the FBI. Declan hit a final keystroke. The screen flashed green. He closed the laptop with a definitive snap. "And I just sent the proof of Bradley's waterfront embezzlement to the Sinaloa cartel's primary broker." Harper turned to look at him. "You just sentenced him to death." "No," Declan corrected softly. "He sentenced himself the moment he decided to steal from the cartel. I just expedited the paperwork." By 8:00 p.m., the storm finally broke, leaving the sky over the estate a bruised purple. Harper stood in Declan's massive office, wearing dark jeans and a heavy wool sweater. Her feet were properly bandaged, the pain dulling to a manageable ache. On the wall monitor, the local news played on a muted loop. The chyron at the bottom of the screen told the whole story in bright red letters. FBI raids waterfront development. DA resigns amidst corruption scandal. Real estate mogul Bradley Stanton found dead in penthouse. The anchor's somber face confirmed it was ruled an apparent suicide, though the shattered glass suggested a much more violent, organized conclusion. The cartel had moved faster than the police. The heavy mahogany door clicked open. Declan walked in, wearing a dark Henley and slacks, looking entirely unbothered that he had just dismantled an empire in under 12 hours. He walked around the desk and tossed a heavy canvas duffel bag onto the leather surface. The metallic zipper clinked loudly in the quiet room. $2 million, untraceable bills, passports, a clean driver's license, and keys to a sedan parked at the edge of the property, Declan said neutrally. The cartel got their money back, so they have no reason to look for you. Bradley is dead. You kept your end of the deal. You are free to go. Harper stared at the duffel bag. It was survival. It was freedom. She walked to the desk, brushing the rough canvas. She looked out the massive windows at the dark tree line. The world out there was vast, empty, and cold. For 2 years she had survived by hiding in the shadows of a monster who smiled for cameras. She turned to Declan. He was a monster too, but he didn't pretend to be anything else. He didn't lie to her. He didn't treat her like collateral. He had handed her the tools to tear down her abuser and respected her enough to let her pull the trigger. "I don't know anyone in Ohio," Harper said quietly. Declan remained perfectly still. "Then pick another state." "I don't think I want to run anymore," she replied, pushing the duffel bag an inch back across the desk. "You just absorbed Bradley's territory. You have 50 miles of waterfront to manage, a fractured port authority to rebuild, and a cartel broker who knows your name. You're going to need someone who understands how those ledgers work." Declan studied her. The cynicism in his expression gave way to something sharp, dangerous, and deeply approving. He stepped around the desk, closing the distance between them. "This isn't a game, Harper," he warned, his voice a low gravel. "If you stay in this house, you don't get to be a civilian anymore. You step fully into the dark." Harper didn't flinch. She met his gaze, the ghost of a smile touching her lips. "I've always seen perfectly well in the dark, Declan." Declan reached out, his hand gently cupping her jaw. His thumb brushed over her cheekbone, a grounding, heavy touch. "Then welcome home," he said. And that is how a desperate runaway bride stopped running and started ruling. Harper thought she was jumping into the fire to escape the frying pan, but she ended up burning down the whole kitchen with the city's most dangerous ghost by her side. If you loved this deep dive into Declan and Harper's dark, strategic romance, hit that like button right now. Don't forget to share this story with your fellow Mafia romance addicts, and subscribe to the channel with notifications turned on so you never miss our next audio drama. See you in the next one.